We're recording.
All right. Welcome to Decentralized News, your weekly brief of the biggest stories affecting the cryptoverse. I'm your host, Piter, joined as always by Ozzy. What's up, my friend?
Oh, I'm excited. Got warm weather here. Finally, kind of feels like I might be with you in Hawaii, and
Settle down
I'm
over there.
thinking the storms with crypto might slowly be, working their way out.
What did you say? The storm about crypto?
The storms around crypto. Are we gonna get an alt season? Are we not gonna get an alt season? What's gonna happen?
Are
Feel
we
like the waves are
after
slowly
Bitcoin?
settling. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exciting times. We're kind of getting to crunch time. It's kind of like fourth quarter, or maybe first quarter next year is a lot of the predictions. So it's like, what's going on? But yeah, let's jump into it. One of the stories we follow a lot is corporate treasuries and just new companies. And it's like to the point where we can't keep up with it. But I did find this one really cool article. It was Standard Charter's global head of digital assets. What is it? Geoff?
Or asset research. Yeah.
Yeah. In a June 3rd report they shared with Cointelegraph, so they had an article. It looked at the trend of corporations adopting a Bitcoin treasury strategy. Couple of numbers jumped out. They looked at 124 companies, 61 or 60 they looked at hold 3.2% of the Bitcoin supply, and that number has doubled over the last 2 months. So we're seeing this pick up a lot of steam. Bitcoin treasuries, there's a quote from him. Bitcoin treasuries are adding to Bitcoin buying pressure for now, but we may see, there's some risk there, and this may reverse over time. So that's kind of the big question. Can these companies handle the volatility when Bitcoin goes down 70%, 80%, in the next bear market? 58 out of these 61 corporate treasuries have a net asset value, a NAV multiple above one, meaning that their market valuation is greater than value of their net assets. So can they hang on to their Bitcoin? Or is that going to be sell pressure in the future? That's the big question. But either way, right now, there's still a lot of excitement. There's a lot of buy pressure. That's the bottom line. It's picking up steam. There's no doubt about it.
Oh, absolutely. Especially considering the fact that, when we were first talking about this, it was there was maybe 20 companies, like 25 companies that had Bitcoin like treasury
That's a
strategies.
strategy, but just somehow held it. And most of them were like mining companies. Anyway,
Oh, absolutely.
it's like more
Like
sell
not on
buy pressure.
yeah, that's it. I mean, a couple companies aren't on this list. Marathon Holdings, Mara, which is a mining company, and Tesla, which both hold a bunch of Bitcoin. They aren't on this list for some reason. We assume it's because they don't have strategies and it's just as part of their operating model why they weren't analyzed. But
There's
I think the
notable missing pieces. I mean, they certainly hold like big chunks.
oh,
I think they're like in the top five in terms of holdings, maybe top
I
three.
believe so. Yeah. And I mean, you talked about the excitement around these corporate Bitcoin treasury strategies. I think the NAV being that high kind of shows that. The NAV being above one really just shows that there's excitement and buying pressure on those stocks because they're buying Bitcoin realistically. And that's why their NAVs are too high, and you could see a correction, or you could kind of see an overcorrection like we saw with Grayscale and their like mini ETFs, like their before the ETFs were really a thing, kind of their own the GBTC, when we used to talk about what if it was trading above or below parity, what the discount was on it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these companies could face that a
That's
similar
a comparison,
situation.
relating it to the last cycle.
Yeah, like at one point GBTC was trading above, was worth more than one Bitcoin. Like it took 1.1 Bitcoin or something like that to get one GBTC.
And then it went
And
all the way the other direction too. You could get Bitcoin at a discount.
exactly. And so at one point, I think it was selling at almost a 30% discount.
Yeah.
And so we could very well see that be the case for all of these companies mentioned
It ended up being
above
a
that.
good play, right? Like the switching over to the ETF.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It ended up being a very good play for those that held on or bought the discount.
Yeah.
But right now on these companies, it might not be the best time to buy because they're above their NAV, and it could drop significantly if Bitcoin turns the other direction in the next year or so.
They also got one. There's like some tea company that just randomly changed their name to like Blockchain Group or something like that back in the last cycle for like no reason. I mean, they had nothing to do with it. And this next report kind of talks about that a little bit, or some of the risk that's entering the system with all these companies just kind of copying this strategy. I mean, you have companies like Strategy, Metaplanet, Similar, even 21 now. I mean, they're stacking relentlessly, but we're seeing a lot of copycats with no profitable underlying business model and no legacy Bitcoin experience, and they're raising huge sums. So, for example, you have the Nadi Coffee. It's a Spanish coffee chain. They have 10 shops, plan to purchase 1.1 billion, and they've never been profitable. You have K-Wave Media, it's a Nasdaq listed entertainment company raising 500 million to buy Bitcoin for the treasury, generate no revenue, reporting ongoing losses, currently unprofitable. Locate Technologies, 6 Bitcoin, but still becoming Australia's first Bitcoin treasuries company, despite year-to-date net loss, earnings declining 23% annually over the last 5 years. So you look at companies like this, and if more and more start to do this, how do they hang on when they're not making any revenue? Bitcoin sees like a huge correction, inevitably.
Especially if they're using debt to do it. And if you're thinking about corporate debt, they could get called on that debt as Bitcoin goes down, and they're either going to go bankrupt and they'll have to sell that Bitcoin,
Or they
or
have years of steel because they've been in the industry forever, but they don't have a history with it, something like
yeah,
that. Just like, oh,
that's
we're gonna
it.
raise more because we're so confident that this is a good time, to do this.
Yeah, so there's definitely some risks there, especially when we talk about companies like this that especially if they go over their NAV, like
Roughly,
raising
like
because they're
all are
buying Bitcoin.
apparently
Yeah,
according to this report, like all of them,
so
almost all
that's
95, 98%.
that's a pretty huge risk.
And
If
we're
it,
seeing this market even expand into the alts.
Oh, absolutely. There's the US sports betting platform SharpLink Gaming. I hadn't really heard of them too much before now, but on May 27th, they announced that they would be launching an Ethereum based corporate treasury strategy and nominated Ethereum co founder Joseph Lubin as their chairman of their board of directors.
Yeah, don't quote me on this,
So,
but I think we're like this last week of news with them, like a 400% increase in the stock price.
which is just nuts. And
I'm not sure
that
what it's
was,
sitting at now, but
yeah. And I mean, looking at they filed on May 30th, they're looking to offer up to a billion in the sale of shares of common stock in order to increase the holdings of their newly launched Ethereum treasury. So like they're selling massive amounts of common stock in order to fund this strategy. It's wild, and we're seeing, as you said, it's expanding into alts because they're not the only ones. Strategies, which is essentially trying to be a company similar to Michael Saylor's strategy, has announced a plan to raise $1 billion to buy Solana. They've already filed preliminary base shelf prospectus with that goal of raising $1 billion to acquire Solana tokens, and they're looking. They're kind of drawing comparisons to Michael Saylor's Bitcoin acquisition strategy. They've announced several strategic asset transactions, having acquired at least 4.7 million US dollars worth of Solana at an average price of 177.50, and they had divested their remaining Bitcoin at which is 3.21 Bitcoin at $103,000.
they're putting their money where their mouth is.
Absolutely, but
Interesting. You know what I mean? I mean, it's it's got a ticker. You can buy it. I'm not sure what exchange it's on. The CSE, I think it says, but I'm not sure. But maybe you can get at it. You know what I mean? And it seems like a degen stock play. It's Sol related. But of all the alts, a lot of people talk about Ethereum, and it's Sol is right up there.
absolutely,
A
it's
lot of
very
action
interesting.
on the Solana network.
Yeah, I mean, I we talked about this ages ago that this could be our black swan of this cycle, these corporate strategies, and it's definitely making me feel more and more like that, looking over my shoulder, looking what's going on.
Where's the leverage that's going to pop in the system this time? And it's there's a lot of institutional investment, so it's like makes sense that that's where the bubble may be is on the institutional side.
Absolutely, especially because they have been using a lot of like volatility in the kind of spot or leverage markets, like on exchanges, to pull out throughout this cycle. They've been really like hard on that liquidity, and so that liquidity's got to be somewhere. And right now, all of these companies raising hundreds of millions, if not billions, of dollars to buy Bitcoin or alts seems to be where that debt is accumulating, that leverage is accumulating right now.
Well, exciting times. I am going to be here to watch it. If you're enjoying the content, please do consider liking and subscribing. We are not financial advisors. Please do your own research. Do you see this article out of Fortune Crypto magazine?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty interesting, and
There's some
it
big
does.
mentioned in this headline. It's a
Yeah,
flash.
and I mean, I think it's the what I like about this article
The headline.
is that oh, the headline is that Apple, Google, X among other big tech firms weighing crypto payment options, and that's I mean that's a big headline to start with, and the the companies that are also involved include Airbnb.
Yep.
They're talking about like Google Cloud. They're talking about
To the company
Uber
like a
even.
firewall so far.
Yeah. And so this is like very interesting. It's they're doing this to try and optimize both cross-border payments and transaction costs on their platform. They're trying to essentially squeeze Mastercard and Visa and become more
And
attractive as a platform by integrating crypto stablecoins for payments. And
and
I think that's
companies start integrating the stable coins, really, like, what do we need Visa and MasterCard for anymore? You know?
oh, absolutely. There I mean there's some software stuff, but I mean absolutely like this really starts putting the squeeze on them, and it starts making a fees on the corporate side less expensive. They can pay much less to Mastercard or Visa to do transactions, whatever they're charged off the top as their merchant fee, and then what us as users have to pay for using any of these, usually kind of as a service charge or whatever
Or it's just
drops or
inconvenient.
disappears.
I've worked in the food industry my whole life, and dealing with payments of like credit card, like it is awful what they charge. You know, I mean, right now I'm working for one that's cash only, just because it's just ridiculous. But that's hard to operate like that as well. You know, yeah.
Oh yeah, the accounting for that is a pain, absolutely nightmarish.
People that walk out every day because they cannot use their credit card, but at the same time, like if we take credit card payments, then we're gonna have to raise prices 10%. You know?
Oh, absolutely. That's what I'm talking about is just that squeeze. Their Mastercard and Visa in particular, although there's some other operators, American Express, Monero, yeah, I think it's Monero or Monera, which is their card platform up in Canada.
Because
Um,
Monero is like that privacy coin.
no, I know it has a very similar name. I just can't remember exactly, but and Clover, all big platforms that could face huge squeezes because of just how cheap it is to use crypto stablecoins to make these transactions and how quick it is too. That especially if you look at platforms, if you look at Solana, if you look at Base, if you look at any of the most of the layer twos, it gets really cheap and really fast. So
Well,
that's
that's the
pretty
only
interesting.
big splash story this week. Kind of, I mean, Fortune reporting, it's all just sources that they're working on it and they're going to integrate it, but it's exciting. I mean, we start seeing some of these big names integrating crypto. These are catalysts that could drive, are we going to get an alt season? Are we going to have a blow off top for Bitcoin? These are potential catalysts. Anyway, let's get into this next story. Stablecoin issuer Circle made a strong entry into the public market on June 5th. So they had an IPO. And their shares climbed like 167. They started like at 30. It got all the way up to around 140. Not quite, sitting around 116 right now. So stablecoins, you know, the big movement in DeFi, or I don't know how you describe it, but kind of like the killer app might be Just stablecoins
I definitely think that they are a big killer app. We
to the
talked about, yeah. I mean, Circle doing over, like, going from an IPO at $31 to 140, now hovering around 116. That's,
the appetite for the market.
oh, there's huge appetite. And I've seen many reports from Sari and other very reputable research firms that say that stablecoins on chain are going to be growing at least 8x in the coming years, if not much more, because there's now like money markets. If you can have much more fluid money markets compared to what exists now, and more accessible versions of them, stablecoins just make a lot more sense.
24/7, cheaper, faster. I mean, what am I missing?
Exactly. It
It's like
gets,
Bitcoin layer two.
in some ways, I think, Bitcoin, because of the speed of transaction and the cost, like, will never be the payment layer.
I mean,
But
maybe if Lightning keeps, there's some potential there with Lightning, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying.
but these stable coins definitely feel like that beautiful layer that goes on top of Bitcoin, as just the transaction rails of the world. And you can use Bitcoin for those really big transactions that you really want to make sure are secure, and that's like store value. But when you need something quick, fast, and cheap for day-to-day use, you go use one of your stable coins.
Stable coins are your checking.
Absolutely. I think it's
Future.
pretty exciting.
Well, we've got more pretty cool adoption news, on the government side or on the game theory side, I guess you'd call it. But we had two pro crypto leaders elected to countries around the world, both in Poland and in South Korea. Probably the bigger splash, the more exciting one. Oh, the Poland one's really interesting too. So pro crypto president Lee Jae-myung, sorry if I killed that, was sworn in on June 4th, 2025, following a snap election triggered by an impeachment of his predecessor. There was some drama out there in the last year. His policy platform includes the legalization of spot cryptocurrency ETFs. Additionally, he's advocating for allowing institutional investors, including the National Pension Fund, to invest in cryptocurrency. Another cornerstone of his strategy was to introduce a Korean-backed won stablecoin, so stablecoins still in the mix. And South Korea has always been a hub for Bitcoin and crypto trading. So Lee just wants to turbocharge this. Now, these are all proposals, and we'll see what he can get done. There's definitely like a space between what president wants and what he's able to get done, and how long he's in there and all that. But still, exciting news. And then also in Poland, pro Bitcoin politician, I'm going to give it a try, Karol Nawrocki, will be Poland's next head of state after the National Electoral Commission published a full report giving him a very slim, and I think this was a surprise, 50.89%. For Bitcoin and crypto investors, the more immediate story is that the winner ran and won on an explicitly pro Bitcoin platform ever seen in a major EU country. So during the campaign, he tied his monetary agenda to a broader supply side tax overhaul. So this is kind of what he's going to be working on. He wants to abolish a 19% Belka capital gains tax, a levy that captures both equities and digital assets. But the important part, removing the tax would leave Poland as one of the lowest realized gain burdens on Bitcoin in the European Economic Area. He also framed himself as a negative regulator, someone who would veto, because I think one of the things he doesn't have a real strong majority, but he can veto stuff. But he'll veto restrictions rather than draft new crypto laws. I will be the constitutional firewall against any attempts to criminalize ordinary Poles from holding or spending Bitcoin. So, good news around the world. There's like some good stories out of Pakistan too. So it's creeping up everywhere, it feels like.
It's definitely becoming a popular platform to run on, where it's showing that it's working. I think the one thing that I think partially Trump's shown, but now even these other elections have shown, is that if you talk to Bitcoiners, they are usually very passionate voters and very passionate people. And so if if you speak,
single issue voter issue.
yeah.
Like there's a
And
lot of
so
a lot of people in this space that it's like, okay, I'll look over a lot of BS if you just tell me you're going to be the strongest on Bitcoin or crypto in general.
Absolutely. And so that has definitely been something that we're seeing more and more, and could like show like see a continued wave throughout maybe the rest of the EU and the rest of the world as crypto and Bitcoin become a more and more popular platform, and might make it a bit hard to distinguish the BS from the real, but we'll see about that. Looking kind of at that macro, what's
Moon.
yeah, one moon. One thing that could help Bitcoin Moon is EU has cut rates.
Yeah, that's a good.
So this is pretty good news. Just Europe, if we're seeing cutting around the world, then that's good news. And the EU cutting rates is definitely going to free some liquidity.
And it seems like it puts pressure on the Fed too. It's like, well, what's up, guys? Everybody else is doing it. What about you?
Absolutely. That being said, Canada held steady on their rates.
Lower at the meeting before.
Yes, so Canada's lowered their rates pretty steadily for the last 6 months. They're currently sitting at about 2.75% in Canada for their key interest rate, and they held it flat at their last meeting. But Europe, which tends to be a bit more conservative, cut rates, so that's pretty good news for the Fed on the U.S. side.
We're 9 days out, right around there.
Yeah, that's it. We're 9 days out, but unemployment last week came in unchanged at 4.2%. So nothing crazy to incentivize the Fed to change their stance. CP,
Overall,
CPI and PPI are coming in this week on Wednesday and Thursday, with the Fed on on the 18th. So we'll see what that means, but right now looks very much like no change, and even a minuscule chance of potentially a raise. You think we actually see a raise,
no,
Piter?
it's the fact that I mean I haven't seen that on when we look at what are the odds, it was actually like a 0.1% they're going to raise it. It's like wow, we really have gone the other way. So I wouldn't expect. I mean, a cut would shock the markets just because of the expectations. You know what I mean? Yeah, it'd be huge. So we're 3 meetings away from when the market has a majority that we're going to get a cut. So, but you got Trump calling for cuts. He's like, cut it a percent. We're going to have a new Fed chair, soon. So who knows how it's going to play out. But so far, the Fed have been in line with expectations this close to the mean. They're batting like 1,000% since the bear market started. It seems like what I mean? Like I can't remember the last time it wasn't kind of what was expected. So I don't think we're
Yeah,
gonna see a lot of volatility from the Fed meeting, but maybe with the CPI report, we'll see how that
maybe.
goes. I mean, it's expected to go up a little bit, it looks like. So
Yeah,
see if that pans out, if inflation is increasing a little bit. So if it stays flat or goes, below expectations or even down, that would be huge.
yeah. If it definitely, looking at it, if it comes in below expectations, that would be huge for the market. I think that could really swing the expectations heading into the June 18th meeting. But I think it's very unlikely we see something on the 18th. It's more likely we see something in July. If not, we're waiting till September.
Yeah. But I mean, that's kind of like a lot of people are talking about when all season or when's the earliest, kind of after the summer lull, kind of heading into the fourth quarter, maybe. But yeah. So let's see. All right.
I'm always interested to see what the Fed does. They've been pretty tight-lipped lately.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they're feuding. I don't know what's going to happen with that. And then they're like, Chair Powell like had a press conference. And I don't know if it wasn't like expected or whatever, but people were like, he's going to resign. That's not what happened. So we'll see. But let's jump into the speed run. What do you say?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's jump into it.
Potential catalyst. This was a kind of a cool story from Polymarket. They became like the official prediction market of X. So kind of big news for Polymarket.
Yeah, that is pretty big.
Poll and
Uh,
I mean, it seems like. Did you ever use
yeah,
it?
I did. Yeah, I did a little
Place
bit for
bets
the. Well, essentially, you're betting on what might happen, like what you think will happen based on like. So there might be a question like there was a question of, yeah, who's going to win the presidency, who's going to win X state, what HBO, like when the HBO documentary on who was going to be the founder of, who they think the founder of Bitcoin is, who
Right.
do you think they're going to say it's going to be? And there was a whole bunch of different options.
Mm.
And so they've got tons of different, both pulp culture, sport,
Right. It's not all crypto
politics.
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, sports and everything.
So
I would imagine.
it's not necessarily like it's not as much sports betting as like
Like,
other platforms. It's more just, yeah, who's going to win the game. And a couple sometimes they do points, but only for big enough games. So it's definitely interesting. But what's even more interesting is that the SEC is hosting a roundtable on DeFi right now.
as we
As
speak.
we're recording, they're talking all about DeFi, and there was even this comment that came out from the chair of the SEC, Paul Atkins, saying that they're working on policy to exempt DeFi platforms from regulatory barriers. So that's pretty interesting. It's a singular quote taken out of context, but
It is,
still,
they've had a series of these roundtables. I mean, this one's DeFi focused, which is cool, but it's about getting some people comfortable even working in the space because it seems like that has been lacking this cycle, or it's a legacy of like the choke point 2.0. Like it still hasn't rebloomed or reblossomed. Like the seeds are being planted, but DeFi hasn't, I don't know, really seen that surge like we saw, it seems like in the last cycle by now.
absolutely, I agree with you on that. It's been a bit slow on
Like
the adoption side.
area in that space, which was it just felt real innovative and it's just like a fun place to be. It seemed like last cycle compared to this one, but with more regulatory clarity. But at the same time, you also have to have your stuff together to deal with regulations. So maybe it takes some of the novices out a little bit, and it's a little bit longer planning strategy to be successful.
Oh, definitely. I think there's it there if there's regulation involved, you've got to think a little bit more. You've got to construct your messaging a bit more. You've got to be a bit more clear on how exactly you operate your business model.
You have to
Uh,
have a compliance department. Sorry, buddy.
yeah, you got to have more often than not. A lot of these regulations for regular folks are incredibly difficult to like go through, and so that generally means you're hiring a crypto lawyer.
That didn't exist. It was kind of like Wild Wild West last cycle, whereas now it's like, you know,
Yeah, there's people that have niched down and are really familiar, but they also charge a hand and a leg, like to just an arm and a leg to just look at anything and give you their opinions.
and they're still risky propositions. It's like a riskier side of the market, in DeFi. So, you know,
You
careful.
gotta you gotta watch yourself a little bit more. Absolutely. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with DeFi, especially with this deregulation. But one space that has been doing fairly well is AI agents and virtual, which is the virtual agents commerce protocol. They're launching that part of their business very soon. This is going to allow AI agents to interact and complete on-chain tasks. So, there used to be very like purpose, very specific things that AI agents could do. This is now looking at allowing those AI agents to talk to one another and collaborate on tasks, which is pretty cool, especially when you're talking about on chain activities. So that's pretty insane.
All right. We also have Pump Fund. They're planning a $1 billion token sale at a $4 billion valuation. So, I mean, Pump Fund is where a lot of the action is on Solana. I mean, now there's like a million copycats, it seems like, both on other chains and on their chain. But they were, first mover in that space and the whole meme coin space. But it's more than meme coins now. Like projects launch on Pump Fund and launch pads like these. So, but what are they doing? They're doing their own like layer two. Like they're just like
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if they're launching it for their platform or like as a revenue share. I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
your way a token around. that space seems like there could be a lot of hype in that.
I
Sonic
mean, the
also,
valuation shows the hype, and that's why I haven't paid too much attention to it because at a $4 billion valuation, you're talking at they're that's already a pretty top notch crypto project at this point. It would put them top 30
what's
Uniswap's.
the market cap? Just Solana itself. Like what percentage of Solana?
Well, Solana's got a $81 billion market cap, $82 billion market cap, so a 20th of Solana's market cap, or like
I mean, we're talking like a huge percentage just of Solana's market cap, right?
yeah, that's 5% of Solana's market cap, and
Not
it
a
would
lot.
put it basically on par with Uniswap and Aave, which are leading DeFi protocols,
Mm.
been around multiple cycles that are both right around the $4 billion mark. Like it would put it bigger. It would value it higher than Aptos or Ondo or even like Polygon. It would put it at almost double the valuation of Polygon or and the Trump meme coin. So that gives you an idea of just how high that valuation is. But it'll be interesting to see.
Digestible to some, I'm sure.
Oh, digestible to certain, I'm sure, but I'm not my cup of tea. I would say there'll definitely still be gains, but definitely not where in my wheelhouse.
Sonic also in the news. They have a season 2 airdrop, and they did make an announcement about 25% of it being liquid and 75% vested. So temper your expectations
Interesting.
if you're
Lots of
planning on jumping
lots of
ship right away.
companies choosing to vest their airdrops nowadays. But
And then the
AVAX
final
sticking around. Bergen
speed
County
run
in New
story.
Jersey
Uh,
is going to be
story
tokenizing
for
$40
Blast
billion
recently
worth
with
in property
DeFi.
deeds on
Their chief
Avalanche.
is
The
up next.
5-year
So that was a
project
big for
is
them.
going
But
to
also they're
digitize
following up with Bergen County to tokenize
370,000 property
200
deeds. It's the
property
most
deeds on
populous county
Avalanche
in New
blockchain.
Jersey
So
and
the
digitize them
5-year-old
on
project
Avalanche. So
digitized
that's pretty big. Seeing
370,000 property
Avalanche and
deeds
their
across New
subnets
Jersey's most
continue to,
populous
to make
county.
strides in that
So
RWA
it's continuing to
tokenization
stay
space.
in the
So
news.
I
Wraps
can't
it up for us.
complain.
Thank you for
I'm
joining us.
happily
If you
surprised
enjoyed
by
the
what
content,
TVAX is
subscribe.
doing this
Not
year.
financial,
Now,
marketable.
I want to thank all of you for joining today's episode, and thank you for watching. Remember, we are not financial advisors, and we will both see you in the next episode. See you next week.